My name is Clara, and I'm 32 years old. The last time I saw my family, they were sitting across a polished mahogany table, their faces a mixture of cold fury and righteous satisfaction, as they unanimously voted to fire me from the company I founded. They told me I was the reason it was failing, that my vision was a liability. They didn't know that in 1 month, a legal notice would arrive at their door that would not just dismantle their narrative, but dismantle the entire business. A lawsuit for massive patent infringement, filed by me. The boardroom felt like an icebox that day, but it had nothing to do with the air conditioning. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, a position he'd appointed himself to 2 years ago. He had this way of puffing out his chest, trying to project an aura of a corporate titan, but he was just a man who had inherited his father's money and never had an original idea in his life. To his right was my mother, Eleanor, her face a perfect mask of disappointment. She'd always seen my ambition not as a virtue, but as a flaw, something unladylike that needed to be tamed. And beside her, smirking, was my older brother, Mark. Mark, who had always lived in my shadow and hated me for it. He was the company's head of sales, a title he used mainly to expense lavish lunches and trips. "Clara, we've reviewed the quarterly projections," my father began, his voice echoing with false solemnity. "And they are, to put it mildly, a catastrophe." He slid a folder across the table. It was full of charts and graphs, all pointing down. Red ink everywhere. I didn't need to see it. I knew the numbers. I was the one who stayed late every night trying to find a way to fix the mess Mark's department had made of our last product launch. "The board, and the family, agrees," he continued, gesturing to my mother and brother, the only other board members, "that the problem lies with product development. Your relentless pursuit of these experimental designs has alienated our customer base. Your spending on research and development is draining us dry." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Experimental designs? He was talking about the proprietary sonic cleansing technology that had put us on the map. The very technology that I had designed, prototyped, and patented myself before I even incorporated the business. The business I had foolishly made a family affair. "Dad," I started, my voice shaking slightly, "that R&D is our entire competitive advantage. It's the only thing separating us from a dozen other companies. The sales are down because the marketing campaign was a disaster. The messaging was completely wrong." Mark scoffed, leaning forward. "Oh, here we go again. Blame the sales team. Blame marketing. It's never your fault, is it, Clara? You and your little pet projects. You think you're some kind of genius, but you don't understand business. People want simple. They want cheap. They don't want your complicated, expensive gadgets." "Expensive," he said. "Our flagship product was expensive because the components I'd invented were revolutionary. And it was our bestseller for 3 straight years, until he decided to slash the marketing budget for it to fund a sponsorship for his favorite golf tournament. The betrayal was so sharp, so absolute, it felt like a physical blow. I looked from my brother's smug face to my mother's silent judgment, and finally to my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. He was the CEO. He was supposed to lead, to be impartial. Instead, he was the lead executioner. "This isn't personal, Clara." "It's business," my father said. "The ultimate coward's cliché. We're restructuring. Mark will be taking over as the interim head of product. He has a more commercially viable vision." I almost laughed. Mark's vision was to buy cheap, pre-made components from overseas and slap our logo on them. He wanted to turn my life's work into a generic drop-shipping operation. "You're firing me?" I asked, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "From my own company?" "We're protecting the company," my mother said, finally speaking. Her voice was brittle. "From you. We gave you a chance to build something, and you became reckless. It's time for a steady hand at the wheel." They handed me a box, a small, sad cardboard box. They told me to clear out my personal effects from my office, not my lab, they specified. All lab equipment and prototypes were to be considered company property. Security would escort me. I stood there, clutching the empty box, my mind reeling. For 10 years, I had poured every ounce of my soul, my creativity, and my own money into this company. I'd sacrificed relationships, sleep, and my own well-being to build it from a blueprint in my garage into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. And in 20 minutes, They had erased me from it. They made me the scapegoat for their own greed and incompetence. Standing on the sidewalk outside the gleaming office building with that pathetic little box in my hands, I felt a profound sense of humiliation. But underneath it, something else was stirring. A cold, hard clarity. They thought they had taken everything from me. They were wrong. Have you ever had your biggest supporters turn into your biggest obstacles? Share your story in the comments. Knowing you're not alone can be the first step to fighting back. And make sure you subscribe, because you're going to want to see what happens when a family of thieves discovers the assets they stole are worthless without the one person they threw away. To understand how I ended up in that boardroom, you have to understand that the company wasn't always a family business. For the first 2 years, it was just me. Me in my parents' garage, surrounded by soldering irons, oscilloscopes, and circuit boards. I had just finished my engineering degree and was obsessed with the application of sonic frequencies for deep cleaning. I funded the initial prototypes with my savings from part-time jobs and a small inheritance from my grandmother, the only person in my family who ever told me my brain was a gift, not a burden. She'd be spinning in her grave if she knew what they did. The company, which I named Innovate Dynamics, was born from that obsession. My first product, the Aura Cleanse, was a handheld device that used a unique vibrational pattern I developed to remove impurities from surfaces far more effectively than anything on the market. I built a website, filmed my own demos, and sent units to tech reviewers. It went viral. Suddenly, I had more orders than I could possibly handle. I was working 20-hour days, sleeping on a cot in the garage, and I was deliriously happy. But I knew I couldn't scale it alone. I needed capital. I needed a real facility. That's when my father stepped in. He saw the purchase orders, saw the articles in tech magazines, and suddenly his perpetually distracted daughter became his most interesting project. He and my mother invited me to dinner at a fancy restaurant, the kind they usually reserved for business associates. "Clara, we are so incredibly proud of you," my father said, beaming. "But you're an inventor, not a businessman. You're vulnerable. These venture capitalists, they're sharks. They'll take your idea and leave you with pennies." My mother nodded in earnest agreement. "He's right, darling. We should keep this in the family. Let your father help you. He knows this world." They proposed a deal. They would provide the capital for a new facility and a proper production line. In exchange, they wanted a controlling interest in the company. Dad would be CEO, bringing his decades of business experience. Mark, who had just been fired from his third sales job in 5 years, would be brought on as head of sales to give him purpose and direction. I would be the chief technology officer, free to do what I did best, innovate. It sounded like a dream. It was presented as an act of love, a way for the family to build a legacy together. I was young, exhausted, and desperately wanted their approval. So I said yes. It was the single biggest mistake of my life. The poison seeped in slowly. At first, it was small things. My father would rephrase my ideas in meetings and present them as his own. As I was telling Clara, he'd begin, before repeating my exact strategy back to the team. Mark, meanwhile, was a disaster. He didn't understand the technology, so he couldn't sell it effectively. He relied on discounts and promotions that ate into our profit margins. When I tried to explain the value proposition to him, he'd roll his eyes and say, "Just tell me the buzzwords, sis. I'll handle the schmoozing." The first major product we launched under the new family structure was the Aura Cleanse 2.0. I had developed a new battery technology that doubled its life and a more ergonomic casing. I was incredibly proud of it. In the launch press release, my father took full credit for spearheading the new power efficiency initiative. Mark was praised for securing a large order from a mid-level retail chain, a deal he only got by offering them a 40% discount and 180-day payment terms, a decision that nearly crippled our cash flow for 2 quarters. My contribution was summarized in one line. Product design was led by CTO Clara Vance. I was becoming a footnote in my own story. The financial bleed was constant. While my R&D budget was scrutinized down to the last paperclip, Mark was expensing 5-star hotels and client dinners that never resulted in significant contracts. I once found a receipt for a $2,000 bottle of wine on his expense report, listed under Client Entertainment. When I brought it to my father, he waved it away. Mark is building relationships, Clara. It's an investment. You wouldn't understand. You're always locked away in your lab. My mother was the silent enforcer of this dynamic. She'd pull me aside after family dinners. You need to be more supportive of your brother, she'd whisper. He works so hard to be the face of the company. It's not easy for him, you know. You were always the smart one. Her words were meant to sound like a compliment, but they felt like a cage. I was the smart one, the worker bee, destined to stay behind the scenes while Mark, the charming but incompetent one, got the glory. They weren't building a family business. They were building a monument to my brother's ego on a foundation of my work. Every success was theirs. Every setback was mine. They gaslit me into believing I was a volatile, creative genius who was lucky to have them, the sensible adults, managing my talent. They needed me to believe it, because if I ever realized my own power, their entire charade would collapse. The turning point wasn't a single dramatic explosion. It was a slow burn of 1,000 paper cuts that finally severed the last thread of hope I had for them. The final straw came about 2 months before they fired me. I was working on a new project, codenamed Helios. It was a self-sterilizing surface technology, using a thin film that could be applied to countertops, doorknobs, and even phone screens. It was my most ambitious project yet, a genuine game-changer that could expand our business into medical and public spaces. I had poured over a year of research into it, and the prototypes were finally yielding consistent, incredible results. I needed to present my findings to the board to secure a significant budget increase for the next phase of development. The meeting was scheduled for a Monday morning. The entire weekend before, I barely slept. I triple-checked my data, refined my presentation, and rehearsed my pitch until I was hoarse. I knew this was my chance to prove, once and for all, that true innovation was the company's future, not Mark's cheap knockoffs. I walked into the boardroom on Monday, my laptop in hand, feeling a rare surge of confidence. But the room was empty. I checked the time. I was 10 minutes early. I waited and waited. After 30 minutes, I called my father's assistant, who sounded flustered. "Oh, Clara," she said. "Mr. Vance decided to hold the quarterly strategy meeting at the golf club this morning. He said it was just a high-level overview and your detailed tech presentation could wait." The golf club. My R&D budget presentation, the future of the company, had been bumped for a round of golf. A cold dread washed over me. I packed up my things and, on a gut instinct, walked down the hall towards Mark's office. His door was slightly ajar. I could hear him on the phone, his voice loud and boastful. No, trust me, this Helios thing is huge," he was saying. "My R&D chief is a bit of a mad scientist, but she's cooked up something special this time. We're talking about surfaces that clean themselves. Yeah, the applications are endless. We're still in the early stages, but I'm telling you, get in now and I can cut you a deal. My dad's letting me run point on this one." He was pitching my project. My secret, code-named project. He was leaking confidential R&D to some crony, probably for a kickback or just to feel important. The blood drained from my face. It wasn't just that he was taking credit. He was actively sabotaging the project's integrity before it even had a chance. But the real revelation, the moment the floor truly fell out from under me, came when I got back to my office. An automated email notification popped up on my screen. It was from our corporate legal department. Subject: Intellectual Property Assignment Confirmation. I opened it with a trembling hand. It was a confirmation that the patents for the original AuraCleanse technology, numbers 9,145,621 and 10,001-12,543, my patents, filed under my name before the company was even incorporated, had been successfully assigned from Clara Vance Individual to Innovate Dynamics LLC. The transfer had been authorized by the CEO, Richard Vance, using a power of attorney clause buried deep in the 80-page employment contract I had signed years ago without reading closely enough. A contract drafted by my father's lawyer. I felt like I couldn't breathe. They hadn't just taken over my company. They had legally stolen the very foundation of it from me. The patents were my only leverage, my only claim to the core technology. I had naively believed they were still mine, personally. that they were licensed to the company, not owned by it. I had trusted my father. I had trusted that the family aspect of the business meant something more than a corporate structure. It meant nothing. It was a trap, designed from the very beginning to strip me of everything. That was the moment the hurt turned into ice. The naive daughter, the hopeful inventor, she died in that office chair. They saw me as a resource to be exploited, not a person to be respected. They had underestimated me my entire life, and now they had made the fatal mistake of showing me their entire hand. They thought they had all the power because they controlled the company, the board, the money. But they forgot one thing. They might have stolen my old inventions, but they couldn't steal the mind that created them. And they had no idea what that mind was capable of when it stopped trying to win their approval and started planning for war. Standing up for yourself after being knocked down is the ultimate victory. If you agree, hit that like button to show your support for stories of strength and justice. The 2 months between discovering the patent transfer and the day they fired me were the quietest, most intensely focused period of my life. On the outside, I was the defeated daughter. I stopped arguing in meetings. I stopped pushing back against Mark's idiotic marketing ideas. I let my father lecture me on fiscal responsibility without a word of protest. They saw my silence as submission. They thought they had finally broken me. In reality, I was building a fortress. The first thing I did after leaving the office that day was drive to a small, unassuming law firm downtown that specialized in intellectual property. I didn't go to a big, flashy firm that my father would know. I found a lawyer named Arthur Chen, a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 50s with a reputation for being a bulldog. I walked into his office with a copy of my original employment contract, the patent transfer notification, and a USB drive. "They think they've stolen my patents," I told him, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "But they've only stolen the ones they know about." Arthur listened patiently for over an hour as I laid out the entire history, from the garage to the boardroom. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at the documents. "The power of attorney clause is predatory, but likely legal," he said, his tone grim. "Challenging it would be a long, expensive fight with no guarantee of success." My heart sank. "So that's it? They just get away with it?" He held up a hand. "I didn't say that. You said they took the patents they know about. What don't they know?" That's when I slid the USB drive across his desk. "While I was developing the Helios project," I explained, "I stumbled upon a derivative application of the original Oraclen's sonic frequency. It's a completely new method for modulating the vibrational patterns. It not only makes the cleaning process 30% more efficient, but it also extends the hardware's lifespan by 50%. It makes the technology in every single Oraclen's unit they've ever sold effectively obsolete." Arthur's eyes lit up. "And this new method, is it documented anywhere at the company?" "Nowhere," I said. "All the research, the data, the schematics, they're on my personal servers, backed up in triplicate. And for the last 6 weeks, I have been quietly, meticulously, and independently filing a new set of patents. Not for a whole new device, but for this specific, crucial improvement process. The core innovation that makes the old technology work better. I filed them under a new shell corporation I created 2 weeks ago, registered in Delaware. It's called Phoenix Innovations." Arthur leaned forward, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Ms. Vance, you are brilliant. They're manufacturing and selling a product, and the secret sauce that makes it truly special, they don't own it. They don't even know it exists. But they're using a technology that is now infringing on your new pending patents." "Exactly," I said. "I've let them believe the battle is over the old patents, the ones they stole, but the real war will be fought over the new ones, the ones they have no idea I possess." For the next several weeks, I played the part of the demoralized CTO. I would show up to work, do the bare minimum, and watch them run my company into the ground. Mark had already started sourcing cheap, unreliable parts from a new supplier in China, and customer complaints were beginning to trickle in. My father was busy planning a lavish company gala to celebrate their new direction. They were so blinded by their own arrogance, they never once questioned why I was so compliant. They never wondered what I was doing with my evenings and weekends. I was in my new lab, a rented workshop space on the other side of town that I paid for with the last of my grandmother's inheritance. It looked a lot like my old garage, but this time it was a war room. I worked with Arthur to finalize the patent applications, ensuring they were ironclad. I documented every single instance of my family's mismanagement. I copied Mark's extravagant expense reports, downloaded the disastrous sales projections, and saved emails where my father explicitly overruled my technical advice in favor of cheaper, inferior options. I was building an arsenal of evidence. The day they called me into the boardroom to fire me, I almost felt a sense of relief. As my father delivered his pompous speech about my recklessness, I didn't feel shame or anger. I felt a cold, thrilling sense of anticipation. They were handing me the final piece of my strategy on a silver platter. My wrongful termination. They were severing all ties, making the legal separation clean and absolute. They thought they were pushing me out into the cold. They had no idea they were simply opening the door for me to come back, not as their daughter, but as their reckoning. They gave me a cardboard box. I was about to give them a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. The setting for the confrontation was perfect. The Innovate Dynamics Forward Gala. It was my father's masterpiece of self-congratulation, held in the grand ballroom of the most expensive hotel in the city. He had invited industry journalists, potential investors, and the city's business elite to celebrate the company's bold new era, an era that began with my expulsion. I wasn't invited, of course, but I had an invitation of my own to deliver. Exactly 1 month after they fired me, as my father was scheduled to give his keynote address, I walked into that ballroom. I wasn't the defeated daughter in a crumpled business suit they last saw. I was wearing a sharp, dark blue dress. My hair was styled, and my expression was pure steel. Beside me was my lawyer, Arthur Chen, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. The room buzzed with conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. Heads turned as I walked in. I saw a few former colleagues whose eyes widened in shock. I ignored them all, my focus entirely on the stage where my father was just stepping up to the podium, a smug smile plastered on his face. My mother and Mark were at a front table, looking up at him with adoration. I let him begin. I wanted the audience to hear the lies first. "Friends, colleagues, innovators," he boomed. "Welcome. We stand tonight at a pivotal moment for Innovate Dynamics. A moment of rebirth. It's no secret that we've faced headwinds. Difficult decisions had to be made. We had to trim the fat, streamline our vision, and move away from indulgent, experimental projects that no longer served our bottom line." He was talking about me. A murmur went through the crowd. I started walking toward the stage, my heels clicking deliberately on the marble floor. The sound cut through the room. My father faltered, his eyes finding me. The smile on his face froze, then melted into a scowl of disbelief. "Clara? What are you doing here? Security!" But it was too late. I was already at the foot of the stage. Arthur stepped forward slightly, a silent, imposing presence. "I believe you'll want to hear what she has to say, Richard," Arthur said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. I looked out at the confused faces of the guests, then back at my father. "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice clear and amplified by the microphone he'd left on. "Difficult decisions were made. You decided to fire the founder and chief architect of this company. You decided to blame me for the consequences of your own mismanagement." Mark shot up from his seat. "She's crazy. She's trespassing. Get her out of here." I turned my gaze on him. "Am I, Mark? Or are you just terrified that everyone is about to find out that your commercially viable vision is to sell a product whose core technology you don't understand and, as of this morning, you no longer have the legal right to use?" A collective gasp went through the room. My father's face had turned a blotchy, furious red. "This is slander. Our patents are secure. Our intellectual property is wholly owned by this company." "Is it?" I asked, my voice dripping with ice. "You're correct that you legally maneuvered the original Oraclens patents away from me. A clever trick with the fine print. But you made a classic blunder. You assumed the original design was the final design. You assumed innovation stopped the day you took over." I nodded to Arthur. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single, thick document. It was a cease and desist order. He walked calmly to the front table and placed it directly in front of my father's untouched plate of food. "What is this?" my mother whispered, her face pale. "That," I announced to the entire room, "is a legal notice from Phoenix Innovations, the sole and exclusive owner of patent 11,458,912, for a sonic waveform modulation process. A process that, for the last 8 weeks, has been integral to the manufacturing of every single Aura Cleanse unit you've produced. A process you've been using without license, without permission, and without knowledge. Every device on your shelves, every unit in your warehouses is now an infringement. You haven't been streamlining the company, Dad. You've been mass-producing evidence for my lawsuit." My father stared at the document, his hands shaking. He looked from the paper to me, the comprehension dawning on his face like a slow, painful sunrise. He finally understood. The patents he stole were just the shell. I still owned the ghost in the machine. You did this while you were still working for us," he stammered, trying to find an angle. "That's company property." Arthur stepped forward again. "I'm afraid not, Richard. All research, development, and filing for this patent were conducted by Ms. Vance independently, on her own time, using her own resources, after you and your son made it clear her work was no longer valued at Innovate Dynamics. Her employment was terminated. She is a private citizen and an inventor who is now here to protect her property." I looked at my brother, whose face had gone from smug to terrified. "You thought you could take my work, put your name on it, and coast on my ideas for the rest of your life," I said to him, my voice low but carrying. "But you don't have any ideas of your own, do you, Mark? What are you going to sell now?" My father finally found his voice, a pathetic roar of defiance. "This is ridiculous. We'll fight this. We'll bury you in legal fees." I gave a small, sad smile. "You can't. Because your entire company is now frozen, you can't sell your inventory, you can't manufacture new products, and based on the quarterly reports I still have copies of, you don't have the cash flow to survive a month, let alone a legal battle against a firm that's taken my case on contingency. The party's over." I turned to the stunned audience. "I apologize for the interruption. Please, enjoy the gala. It seems it will be the last one this company ever hosts." The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal. My final words hung in the air as Arthur and I turned and walked out, leaving a crater of stunned silence behind us. The next morning, the business journals that were supposed to be publishing glowing reviews of the new Innovate Dynamics were instead running headlines about the dramatic family feud and the bombshell patent infringement lawsuit. The company's stock, which was already fragile, plummeted into oblivion. My father's blustering threats of a legal battle were just that, bluster. As I had predicted, Innovate Dynamics was a house of cards. With their inventory frozen and their production lines halted, their income dried up overnight. Their creditors, who had been patient up to that point, started calling in their loans. Within 2 weeks, they were facing insolvency. They tried to reach out. First, it was their lawyers, with laughably low settlement offers. Arthur dismissed them out of hand. Then came the phone calls. My mother was the first to try. She left a tearful voicemail, not apologizing, but begging me to think of the family and not destroy what your father has built. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. He hadn't built anything. He had colonized my creation. I didn't call back. Mark sent a single pathetic text message. "You win. Happy now?" It was dripping with the same petulant jealousy that had fueled him his entire life. He still didn't get it. This wasn't a game I was trying to win. It was a life I was trying to reclaim. Finally, my father requested a meeting. Not at the office, which was being swarmed by auditors, but at the same fancy restaurant where he had first convinced me to let the family in. This time, there was no celebratory mood. He looked 10 years older. His suit seemed too big for him, his arrogant posture replaced by a defeated slump. "What do you want, Clara?" he asked, his voice raspy. "I want what's mine," I said simply. "The company is bankrupt," he said, shaking his head. "There's nothing left. You've destroyed it." "No," I corrected him. "You, Mark, and Mom destroyed it. I just held up a mirror so the world could see. But you're wrong. There is something left. There's the brand name, the customer list, the distribution channels. And most importantly, The manufacturing facilities. They're all assets. He stared at me, confused. They're being liquidated to pay off our debts. Exactly, Arthur Chen said, speaking for the first time as he slid a proposal across the table. Phoenix Innovations is prepared to make an offer to the bankruptcy court to purchase those specific assets. We'll be paying pennies on the dollar, of course, given the circumstances. But our offer will be just enough to satisfy your primary creditors and avoid further legal action against you personally for corporate malfeasance. My father's eyes widened as he read the document. The color drained from his face. You want to buy the wreckage? I want to buy my company back, I clarified. The real company, the one that's been buried under your debt and ego for the last decade. I'm not destroying it, Dad. I'm saving it. And that's exactly what I did. The bankruptcy proceedings were a formality. My offer was the only viable one on the table. Within 3 months, I was the sole owner of the newly restructured company, which I immediately renamed Phoenix Innovations. I walked back into the facility, not as a fired employee, but as the CEO. I rehired the talented engineers and designers who had been let go or had quit in frustration under my father's reign. My family lost everything. Their reputation was in tatters. My father's personal finances, which he had tied up in the company, were wiped out. They had to sell their large house and move into a small condominium. Mark, with no skills and a reputation for being both incompetent and treacherous, couldn't find a job. The last I heard, he was working as a cashier. I didn't feel joy at their ruin. I felt a profound, quiet sense of justice. It was the natural consequence of their actions. They had built their world on a foundation of lies and exploitation, and when the truth came out, it all crumbled. My victory wasn't in their failure. It was in my freedom. It was the freedom to walk into my lab every morning, filled with people who respected me, and to build something real and lasting on my own terms. The name on the building was mine. The ideas were mine. The future was mine. It's been a year now. 1 year since Phoenix Innovations rose from the ashes of Innovate Dynamics. The labs are brighter now, buzzing with a collaborative energy I'd almost forgotten was possible. We launched the Helios self-sterilizing film 6 months ago, and it's already being piloted in 3 major hospital chains. The very project my father dismissed as an indulgent experiment is set to become the new industry standard. Every success feels clean, earned, and truly mine. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't the legal battle or the stress of rebuilding. The hardest part was grieving a family that, in many ways, never really existed. I spent so long trying to be the daughter and sister they wanted me to be, the compliant, behind-the-scenes workhorse, that I almost lost sight of who I actually was. I thought their approval was the prize, when in reality, their control was the cage. They didn't blame me for the business failing because they truly believed it. They blamed me because I was the most convenient scapegoat. My success was a constant, glaring reminder of their own inadequacies, and it was easier to tear me down than to build themselves up. The lesson they taught me, unintentionally, was the most valuable one of my life. Your worth is not determined by the people who benefit from you not knowing it. They saw me as an asset to be managed, a resource to be plundered. They never saw the person. When they cast me out, they thought they were getting rid of a liability. They had no idea they were setting their greatest asset free. This company isn't just a business to me. It's a declaration. A declaration that my mind, my work, and my worth are my own. This journey taught me that family isn't always about blood. It's about respect, trust, and support. My real family is here now, in the team I've built, in the partners who believe in my vision, and in the quiet satisfaction of creating something that is authentically mine. So I want to leave you with this thought. We all have people in our lives who try to define our value for us. They tell us what we should want, what we should be, and what our limits are. But you are the sole patent holder of your own life. Don't let anyone else claim ownership of it. If this story has resonated with you, and if you've ever had to fight to reclaim your own narrative, share your strength in the comments below. Your story matters. And please subscribe for more stories of empowerment and justice. Thank you for listening.